Okay, so now we're going to look at Vietnamization. Okay, now this is a policy brought in by Richard Nixon to try and end American involvement in Vietnam. In terms of your notes, there's two key questions that I think you need to think about. What was Vietnamization and was it successful? Okay, now in the video we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of sources that link to this. You get a copy of those as well, get them stuck down maybe on an A3 sheet. Couple of mind maps. What was Vietnamization? Was it successful? Yes, no. What can you say there? Okay, so that's the basic plan. Let's have a look. Okay, so look at this source here. What you can see is that Vietnamization represents a scarecrow. Now the key question, I guess, is what is the aim of a scarecrow? Well, it's to scare away the birds. So the first thing you think about it here is this scarecrow working? No. There's birds everywhere, okay? And what those birds represent is communist forces, okay? And they're landing on there. Some of them, as you can see here, are sort of appear almost to be laughing, if birds can laugh. They're pecking away or whatever. And the idea of Vietnamization here is not working. The scarecrow's not working, okay? Now remember, Vietnamization was about a step backwards in the escalation of the war. Remember, before the Marines were sent in, there were advisors in Vietnam. Vietnamization works on a similar principle of getting the southern Vietnamese army to preparing them to fight and continue the war without American involvement. Okay, but I think what's interesting here about this cartoon, of the idea of a scarecrow, is that maybe people felt that the soldiers who were going to do the fighting weren't perhaps proper soldiers. Okay, they weren't properly trained and kind of almost a cardboard cutout kind of thing. And you can see that here. All right, so this is not scaring away the communist forces, okay? It's actually attracting them. They're all coming in, and it seems that almost there's more birds in this field pecking at the crop or whatever than there would have been if the scarecrow wasn't there. So it's almost having the opposite effect of what it is intended, okay? So as I say, once you've got down what Vietnamization is and whether this is obviously evidence that it wasn't a success. Message of the source: the Vietnamization is not working. Okay, details from the source, and then also your own knowledge. The purpose of the source: why was it produced? To persuade people that Vietnamization was a bit of a joke, really, to mock Vietnamization and persuade people that it wasn't working. Okay, again, what can you see in the cartoon that makes that point? And then what do you know from a textbook that makes that point as well? Okay, so here's another source that has again been in an exam or something similar. In the middle we've got Richard Nixon here, okay, and he's trying to keep control of both horses, okay, but the horses are kind of wanting to go in separate directions, aren't they? Okay, and it's just to suggest that Nixon perhaps can't have both things. He can't have Vietnamization and he can't have no surrender. Some would argue that perhaps Vietnamization is surrendering. Okay, so Nixon can't do that. All right. Now, what we need to think about here is obviously the message of the source. You can't have both things at once. If you look here, the Vietnamization horse is kind of buckling and pulling away, and the no surrender seems to be stronger. So obviously that's perhaps argued by the cartoonist as Nixon's key aim, not to surrender. And in order to not surrender, he can't go in this direction with Vietnamization as well. Okay, so perhaps suggesting that if he was to go for that horse, he'd have to let that go and therefore surrender in Vietnam. So maybe Nixon's policy is just another way of trying to get out of the war. Obviously, Nixon's trying to keep face, but again, he doesn't look like he's doing too well here, which again links to the aspect of the source. All right, so again, the message of the source is that Nixon's policy of he can't have his policy of Vietnamization and a policy of no surrender. He's got to choose one or the other. The purpose is to perhaps persuade the audience that Vietnamization is not going to work, it's buckling, and that actually ultimately Nixon will have to go with a no surrender policy and let go of the Vietnamization horse if he wants to do that. So we had a couple of sources here as well. What was Vietnamization? Did it work? Okay, and you can see that there's, if you look in the textbook, there's a few other words like fragging and things like that you need to be aware of with this. Okay, so yeah, have a look at that. What was it, and then was it successful? Any evidence of that? Any evidence it wasn't successful? Perhaps we can see both these cartoons would fall into the latter pile.